I'm Dan from Buildxact. I'm going to be talking about some of the tax and markup changes that have been recently added into Buildxact. In summary, we've added a bit more substance and calculation around how the tax is handled, which allows you to do more with it. And also, we've added a bit more control around how markup is added and distributed throughout your quote and how it ultimately goes to your client. I'm starting with one of my quotes, and I'm in the estimate details page. I want to point out this tax profile box here, and the reason for pointing it out is previously it would have just said tax 15% or 10% depending on where you're based, and now it'll say the profile that it's using. At the end of this video, we're going to have a bit of a dive into how this gets put together, but the main point for kind of highlighting it now is really just to say that for your existing estimates, this won't be here, and really nothing will have changed. It's only going to apply these new tax and markup changes to new estimates or copies of old ones. So if you don't see it, more than likely it's because you're in an old quote. Jumping into the estimate costing screen, I have very purposefully used a very simple example for this to show a few things. And you're going to notice a couple of changes straight away to this costing screen, which I'm going to go through. First of all, this type column, where you can say this is either a material or a labor or a subcontractor or a MATLAB, which is a material and labor item. The reason this is here is largely to control the tax. So depending on how it's set up, this does have the ability to change the tax that gets put on the item, depending on what's selected here. Moving on to these blue boxes over here, we've got GST, and if I go edit, I will be able to change the tax applied to this item. And you'll notice this cost over here is changing, which I'll talk about in just a second. But this is now a really great way of handling tax exempt items. So it means that when we estimate, there's basically no tax put on this item from the start. And then the box over here that keeps changing, this is basically my sell price or quote total. Or another way to say it is when I show this to my customer, if I show this line in detail, this is the price they see. Reason this is here is we have got a lot of feedback over time about things like, hey, I want to see what price my client's about to see, or I want to see how the markup is being calculated more accurately. And this is why this is here. If I click into it, you will notice the raw cost, $1,000, markup on this item is $100, and it's actually getting $300 of redistributed markup, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But all of that brings it to $1,400, and that's the price that will show for the client. So moving into redistribution. Redistribution, I'm going to start by explaining how it previously worked, and then we'll go backwards, then we'll go forwards a little bit into talking about how it works now. And this will give you a really good context as to the problem we're trying to solve. So for this exact quote, I've printed it out before the update, and the way it will show is for the 3 PC items I've got at $1,000 each, we will show that to the client with tax. So 10% brings us to $1,100. And if I, in my quote, was to show each and every item, what we used to do is just assume that we should always show the PC item at its non-marked up price throughout your whole quote. The problem that gave us was that the markup had to go somewhere, and as a result, we would redistribute the markup onto other items. This led to questions from people saying, hey, I've gone through my quote and I don't understand how this price came to be, not realizing that the markup had moved onto it. So in this case, you'll remember the permit was $1,000. We had 10% markup, 10% GST. This $1,500 is well above that, and it's because all of this additional markup is going from here onto here. So we just made that decision for you in the past. Looking forward to today, when I turn these off, when I turn a PC item on, it straight away changes this button, where this button will be either N, C, or E, meaning when I have a PC item, what price will it show and how will it move the markup? So you now get the choice is basically what's happened. N is saying no redistribution, don't move the price at all, meaning this item is at full value, it's showing the markup. If I say C, which is move the cost within the category, you'll notice it now has no markup on it and it's redistributing elsewhere in the category. I purposely did an example with all 3 items redistributing because I wanted to show what happens if it tries to move it in the category and all of the other items are in the same setting or on the same setting and it can't shuffle the markup anywhere else. It'll actually default to the E setting, which is everywhere. So if it can't shuffle it within the category, it'll move it to the E setting, which is to move it everywhere throughout the estimate for you. The way that it used to be set up was the C setting. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change it to this one. So I'm going to say don't shuffle my markup at all. And this is now the marked up price. I'm going to go print my quote and point out very briefly just one other setting which ties into this very well, and that's when I show the PC item table, I've now got the option to point out to my client what markup is on there. So I'm going to turn this on and I'm going to print this quote again. And we're basically going to look at the exact same estimate all over again, but in the new format. So first change is it's now showing the markup that this has because I clicked the little print option box to say show my markup. Second change is this now is without tax. This is purely the cost price. So $1,000 is what I put in and $1,000 is what the client sees. Down further, we have no longer made that decision for you about how it is redistributed. I clicked the N button, which means no redistribution, which means these are shown with tax and markup to the client. And this is shown at its normal price with tax and markup. There's no markup being moved onto this item. If I was to do it another way, which would be to go back and say, hey, move it across the category, and as I mentioned before, it's going to make the decision for me that it can't move it in the category. It's going to push it throughout the rest of the quote. I'm going to turn that on and I'm going to leave it with this setting down here to show the markup. Now, because I've made the decision that I want to move the markup, it's saying, well, you're moving the markup because you're not wanting to show the client that markup. So if I've got the setting on to show the markup to the client, it'll say the 0% because elsewhere in the document, that's the price we've shown. We've shown a price that shows no markup being added. So I guess to put it another way, whatever this shows, we will support that with prices that you show elsewhere in your document. As a result, the markup in this case has been moved back up to here. So definitely have a play around with it. There's quite a few options. What we're going to do lastly is jump into the tax settings and just have a look at how they've been put together. And a quick note, within our FAQ section in here, there are quite a number of articles on this. So if you need further assistance with this, so around how the tax actually works or redistribution, which is likely to be the one people will ask most about, there are some really good articles we've put together in this section. Lastly, we're going to go into the tax settings and tax rates and have a look through how this is all put together. So I've got Australian GST, which right at the start of the video was what I pointed out as being the tax that was being applied to my estimate. So how this is basically structured, I've got 2 lines for income, 2 lines for expense. Income basically refers to any time you're making money. That's a really no-brainer statement, but for us, income means anything on our quote, because we're working towards the contract figure, or anything on our variations. Again, we're working towards a change of contract there. Expense relates only to things we're buying, so that for us is purchasing and work orders. For this first income line, it's saying apply 10% tax to the items when they're material, labor, equipment, or subcontractor by default. The second one is saying, hey, this is our tax exempt or tax-free income, and this is the line I selected when I was choosing to have an estimate line without tax. This third one is the tax on all my expenses, and again, it's default on for my material labor, equipment, and subcontractor. And lastly, I've got a tax-free expense, which I could toggle to for purchases if I need, and that will basically apply no tax to the expense. A point here for users in Australia and New Zealand, we will set this up for you by default. So it's very unlikely that you'll actually need to change this. And we're fortunate where we are that our tax is quite straightforward. But should you want to know more about this, the FAQs that I was talking about just before, there will be a really solid FAQ that talks about how this is all put together. In fact, you can get to it right from here. Great. Any other questions? As always, get in touch with us and we'll be able to help you out. Thanks so much.